And good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
So we're all in our spaces with bright shining faces.
Yep. And we're going to do another episode. This is now Bridge to a Better World. And first, we're going to put up the time taking up devices, starting with this here.
We call it the gathering
Tinsley.
time.
Yeah. There's been a chair collapse.
The chair collapse going?
Seems that my strategy of stacking it on old books didn't work.
No, it's tragedy.
It was just it. Hello, John. Glad you could tune in. Let's see. My plane got stuck. This is now Bridge to a Better World coming up in just a couple minutes.
Hello. And we thank you for joining us. And we do believe from the bottom of my heart that Theresa will be back momentarily.
I am.
Look,
There it is.
she is.
Should we get into content?
Let's.
No, you're very sweet, but you have to get out of the way so I can broadcast. So here. That's a good boy. Very large boy. Yeah. Shall I remove the tin toys and start the thing?
Please.
Alrighty. What do you think about before it's out? Would you like to raise the camera onto the
onto the book? Wait, look. Here we are adjusting. You'd think we'd do this beforehand, wouldn't you? You would. Look.
Hi there. So once again, I'm Theresa Mitchell.
Wait,
this
hit
is
that
Ani
light.
Haynes. I gotta hit the light.
Hit the light. It's a little switchy do. Switchy do.
I'm doing it.
Woohoo! Okay.
It's a bright light.
I don't know. Maybe it's better with that. Never mind. Carry on.
I'm Theresa Mitchell. That's Ani Haynes, and this is This is now Bridge to a Better World. And
And
we have
before
some
we do anything, I just want to say happy anniversary.
happy anniversary to you. So I want to start with some headlines. The United Mine Workers Union came out with a statement, and it's about, well, I'll just read it. The United Mine Workers of America made it clear that it will vigorously challenge an outrageous assessment of damages made by the National Labor Board Region 10 regarding the UMWA's 16-month strike against Warrior Met Coal in Alabama. Quoting, "This is a slap in the face, not just to the workers who are fighting for better jobs at Warrior Met Coal, but to every worker who stands up to their boss anywhere in America." That's a quote from UMWA International President Cecil E. Roberts. He continued, "There are charges for security, camera, capital expenditures, buses for transporting scabs across picket lines, and cost of lost production." And speaking for myself, what's this about? Well, it's a brand new tactic in which if you go on strike, the company will sue your union for the cost of the strike. And of course, this negates everything that was ever useful
About striking.
It's like, what can the union hold against the employer? Well, I suppose litigation to some degree, but striking is the big deal, the threat of a strike. So quoting Roberts again, "What is the purpose of a strike if not to impact the operations of the employer, including production? Is it now the policy of the federal government that unions be required to pay a company's losses as consequences of their members exercising their rights as working people? This is outrageous and effectively negates workers' rights to strike. It cannot stand." And it can't be said better. I mean, this is the end of unions in the United States if it is allowed to stand. The union entered into a settlement agreement in June, according to their statement, with NLRB Region 10 regarding the charges the company had made about picket line activity in order to save striking members and families from days of hostile questioning by company lawyers. On July 22nd, the NLRB sent the union a detailed list of damages totaling $13.3 million, more than 33 times the estimated amount NLRB lawyers had initially indicated would be assessed. So if you've heard that Joe Biden interrupted the rail strike, he did that. But this is possibly even more significant. This is the end of unions. This is the end of democracy in the workplace, if it goes through.
If it goes through.
So that's my first headline for a reason. I mean, this is just absolutely.
Well, it's really unthinkable, right? And at a time, what a coinkydink, at a time when the worker organizing movement is gaining such strength, as we've seen unions making headroads into areas that they just haven't been, as we see the first Amazon warehouse organizing and the groundswell of baristas organizing coast to coast in Starbucks, as we see we reported last week the first Trader Joe's organizing in Massachusetts, and this long strike with very traditional union now really an attempt to gut it, and again undercutting the entire groundswell, using the word again, of movement, of unionizing movement that is going on, that is seizing the country right now.
Yeah, and if you don't know, you should know that getting sued by the rich, and especially getting sued by the government on behalf of the rich, can utterly destroy your life, whether there is any value to the suit or not, or maybe especially if there's not, because you have to get out and show the court, sometimes over a period of years and millions of dollars, that wasn't correct. So this is absolutely an abuse of the courts, and it's reminiscent of the SLAP lawsuits, the strategic lawsuits against public participation that used to be used against protesters, which was finally brought down under First Amendment grounds. Well, this should be brought down under federal protection of union laws. I mean, even the Taft-Hartley law isn't as bad as this. So, changing topic now for the second headline. This is from NBC News, and I don't think it's getting around enough, though, so I'll just put it here under my usual rubric of news you're not supposed to know. Social contagion is not driving an increasing number of adolescents to come out as transgender. Let me say that again.
It's not.
Social contagion is not.
It's not catching.
It's not.
It's not just in the water.
This is according to scientists. According to a new study published Wednesday in the journal Pediatrics. The study also found that the proportion of adolescents who were assigned female at birth and have come out as transgender also has not increased, which contradicts claims that adolescents whose birth sex is female are more susceptible to the so-called external influence. Those silly females. What have you done to me?
What can you say?
What?
Yeah.
You're so cute, though.
Where do you go with this?
The hypothesis.
Okay.
This is a quote. The hypothesis that transgender and gender diverse youth assigned female at birth identify as transgender due to social contagion does not hold up to scrutiny and should not be used to argue against the provision of gender-affirming medical care for adolescents, said the scientist who actually did the work, who is named Dr. Alex S. Karoglian, director of the National LGBTQIA+ Health Education Center at the Fenway Institute and the Massachusetts General Hospital Psychiatry Gender Identity Program. He said that in a statement. And the social contagion theory can be traced back to a 2018 paper published in the journal PLOS One. Dr. Elisa Littman, this is where I would ask you to boo if you were, a live audience, who at the time was a professor of behavioral and social sciences at Brown University, coined the term rapid onset gender dysphoria, which she described as adolescents experiencing a conflict between their birth, sounding familiar, between their birth sex and gender identity. Suddenly, or during or after puberty, these adolescents, she wrote, would not have met the criteria for gender dysphoria in childhood and are experiencing dysphoria due to social influence. Littman also hypothesized, and that's the main word here, Littman also pulled out of her ass that adolescents assigned female at birth are more likely to be affected by social contagion, and as a result, are overrepresented in groups of adolescents experiencing gender dysphoria when compared to those who were assigned male at birth. After intense debate and criticism, PLOS One conducted a post-publication reassessment of the article and issued a correction that included changing the headline to clarify that Littman did not survey transgender or gender diverse youth themselves, but actually surveyed their parents. And this is where I speak for myself and say, I also know, and it has been scientifically determined, that parents suffer a terrific, and I really mean suffer, a terrific onrush of grief and all the things associated with that. It is like death to them. And this is not me saying if you're an adolescent, that you shouldn't transition. I'm saying that
far from it.
It absolutely does reliably cause grief to the level of actually losing a child. This was true, for example, for my poor father, who was he was supportive from the get-go. When I transitioned at the age of 43, was I 43?
Yeah, 42.
And he had to go see a shrink for the first time in his life. And he was a drill sergeant. He didn't like to do that sort of thing. He was in his 60s. It was terrible for him. And so the idea that you can interview the parents about what's going on in the minds of the kids is just, well, it's turf stupid. That's how stupid it is. It's turf stupid. The correction also noted that rapid onset gender dysphoria is not a formal mental health diagnosis at this time, because it's bullshit.
There you go.
So to test the social contagion theory, and this is where the science comes in, actually asked people and did statistics and figured it out. So I won't give you the details on it. Yes, they did
and figured it out.
They did actual science. Everyone was terrified. So did you want to do a news item?
Well, yes, in fact.
Yes, all right. So we're on Tuesday. I was just excited about this.
Yeah. I can tell. You're excited. Well, to that, one step forward, two steps back. Okay, that's a good thing. Meanwhile, as we are seeing across the country, there are homophobes, transphobes, and other phobes out there.
Other phobes
who are ready to cut down any kind of public dialogue. There's a school district in Wisconsin that has reaffirmed that it is against their policy to have any political or um, religious speech. Um, and that includes the displaying of anything like uh, a pride flag or including your pronouns in any of your communications for all staff, teachers, students, whatever. There's none of that. And it's an interesting thing, there's sort of taking it to the obvious ridiculous end, saying that pronouns are banned from the school, which is not too far off, I gotta say, when you start banning people from uh, listing the pronouns that they would like for you to use for them. How far away are you from just banning pronouns in general? Pronouns, they make us uncomfortable.
And didn't this just come in the context of the Supreme Court saying that the coach can go shout to Jesus in the middle of a tax-paid football field after the game?
Details. So beyond the pronoun bans, there's also, the coast to coast movement to ban books. And I think it's always interesting that it's the radical right that is so on fire about cancel culture, when in fact it is the radical right that are working hard to defund public libraries and ban books across the land. So there's a little, as my dearly departed friend and ex-co-host Lynn would say, a little Hector projector going on, right? Whenever we hear them talking about, we need to realize that they are looking in the mirror, that they are not only cancel culture, they are literally burning books and defunding libraries. As in this case, catastrophic is what people are calling it. There's a town in Western Michigan that has basically voted to defund the library because of a fight over LGBTQ themed books.
They would rather have no library than have books in there that might be about, actual science of an LGBTQ.
Yeah.
Or fiction.
So this week, people in Jamestown Township in Michigan voted 62 to 37 against approving a millage that would have applied to residents' property taxes to fund the Patmos Library.
A millage, that's a really tiny tax. That's like a point.
I know nothing about millages.
So,
yeah. So we understand, we stand behind the fact that our community is made up of a very diverse group of individuals, and we as a library cater to the diversity of our community, said a library spokesperson. So the vote followed a dispute over a book called Genderqueer, a Memoir by Mia Kobabe, which appeared in an adult graphic novel section and prompted some residents to speak out against the content at a library board meeting. The library staff attempted to compromise by placing that said offensive book, Genderqueer, behind the counter. So you had to actually ask for it, but that wasn't enough. Residents formed a group called Jamestown Conservatives and pressured neighbors to vote against the millage, which would have added $24 to property taxes for the average homeowner, to keep their library open. Jamestown Conservatives objected that the author's story of coming out as non-binary and handed out flyers reading, "Pray that we can make changes and make the Patmos Library a safe and neutral place for our children," warning that the library's director was promoting LGBTQ ideology. I didn't know that my gender and my sexual orientation were ideologies.
You're opposed to the official ideology, so.
According to Bridge, Michigan, yard signs also appeared ahead of the vote that actually said 50% millage increase to groom our kids. Vote no.
Isn't that charming?
On library.
Because
so again,
all LGBTQIA are pederasts I mean, we're like back to 1930 on this.
Yeah, we really are. So I'm glad that you had some good news on it because I had that.
Yeah.
Okay. Carry on. Go ahead.
Well, there's a list that I got from Rob Bishiza, who was writing in Boing Boing. And, I kind of hate the name of Boing Boing at this point because at this point, they do some good, serious journalism. And I have to say, this is from Boing Boing, which doesn't sound serious at all. But anyway, it's a pretty good article. And it has a little chart and it lists spending amongst worldwide military. And it ranks the top, let's see, it looks like about 10. And so I'll just rattle them off to you, the first four, right? The first, no big surprise, is the U.S. with $731 billion, which tells you that the data is a couple of months old, because now it's $800 billion, or $8 trillion over 10 years, if you like. The second is China, jumping up there with $261 billion a year. And the third, want to guess? Is it Russia? Is it North Korea? No, it's the U.S. police.
Ah, really? You say?
118 billion.
So the U.S. and the U.S. were in competition with each other for our expenditures?
Well, and it's a good article. So I'm just going to quote parts of it. 118 billion was spent funding police forces in the U.S. in 2018. The fourth, by the way, is India, and Russia is the fifth. That's according to Security Policy Reform Institute. It collectively makes American police forces the world's third most expensive military organization after U.S. official armed forces and China's. The chart is somewhat misleading in that the same is basically true of other wealthy countries. Per capita spending on police in Europe is also very high, but the countries are less populous. Police forces in the UK enjoy some 25 billion in funding, for example, but spend proportionate to the U.S. total, but it nonetheless places it outside the top 10 on that military spending chart. But there's one thing that's plainly different. U.S. police, Rob writes, are militarized by policy, trained to treat the public as a threat and kill people in far greater numbers than their foreign counterparts. The declared enemy of the American police forces is the American people, and their war on us claims about 1,000 lives a year. North Korea didn't do it to you.
Well, yeah. And speaking of U.S. cops, I was a little surprised, actually. Yesterday, Merrick Garland announced that, oh, goodness.
Did the paper go away?
My paper went away. My paper.
Oh, dear.
Well, anyway, Merrick Garland announced that the Department of Justice will be seeking charges against 4 cops from Louisiana. They're the first federal charges related to Breonna Taylor's murder. So that is something to note. And I am just curious as all get out. Oh, there we go. There's my first page. Sorry about that. Merrick Garland announced that they are filing federal civil rights charges against 4 current and former Louisville police officers in that fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor. The charges range from falsifying information and deprivation of rights under color of law. So that's, there's a range of charges for the 4 officers involved, and they're the first charges to come down. I'm so sorry to laugh in the middle of the story, but my cat is ridiculous. They are the first federal charges relating to Breonna Taylor's murder to come down. The Justice Department has pursued criminal cases in other high-profile killings of Black people, including the 4 former Minneapolis cops who were involved with killing George Floyd, and the 3 white men who were involved in killing Ahmaud Arbery. In Garland's press conference, he stated that the accused Louisville officers not only violated Taylor's Fourth Amendment rights, but knew the allegations listed in the indictment would be dangerous or could lead to a dangerous situation, one that resulted in Ms. Taylor's death, quote unquote. He further stated that Breonna Taylor should still be alive today. And I thought that was actually, I watched this press conference yesterday, and it was some of the strongest words I've seen him use. and it gave me a moment of feeling like, there is a part of the system that actually is doing something positive there. That's
In the
it.
context of Biden pushing through a pro-police funding bill that gives these over-militarized police, these people who kill 1,000 of us and more a year,
Yeah.
much more money.
Yeah. It's true.
And of course, there's the news that Sean Keeler's alleged killer, a Mr. Knipe, has been arrested after several years. How's it long?
Well, I think
30 years, maybe?
we should probably back up because not everyone knows who Sean was.
Okay,
So-
Sean was an activist and an anti-police activist, and I knew
He's
him.
an anti-fascist activist who became active during Occupy as a teenager.
And I remember him from back then when he would go into Cebu and he called himself, or they called themselves, as it turned out, Yaka. So to me, Yaka's dead, and that was a shot.
So that was in 2019. He was killed in a altercation after leaving a Southeast Portland cider pub. Anyway, for 3 years, there's been what has looked like no work on the case and a lot of speculation about the Portland Police Department not really feeling motivated to solve the case,
Well,
being
it's
that
obvious. I mean, they wouldn't
Sean
even
was such an outspoken uh, critic, since he wrote extensively about the violence that is policing and the need to abolish cops. So there is a lot of speculation around the fact that the cops did nothing for 3 years while his mom kind of went out and working with others solved things, put up her conclusions online, has extensively talked to the press and all of that. And
we've known who's
yeah, so finally
chief
the cops
suspect
caught
was for
up
years.
and have made an arrest in the case, I believe yesterday. So that's breaking news. That's some current stuff. There's more. There's so much more to talk about.
Yes. Well, and they were always right about the police. They are an occupying army. They kill us. They hate us. And they are here to protect rich white cis males, I should say.
Yeah. So, do you have another news short? Because I might.
I
Okay.
do not.
Then I will talk about this. So, and this comes in a sort of bigger context about our hypocrisy in politics. Hypocrisy, hyperbole. You tell me the word I'm looking for after I describe the situation to you. So you may have recently seen ads encouraging people to pressure Congress to demand environmental justice or kill the budget reconciliation bill. No environmental justice, better to not have anything at all, the ads say. And they prominently are featuring images of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib. And we've pointed out, Theresa and I have pointed out many problems that we have with the poison pill provisions that Manchin shot through the budget reconciliation bill that prop up the fossil fuel industry. We've talked about that, but most environmental groups have been pretty upfront about the fact that, well, it's not great. Those shouldn't be in there. That's taken us back, but this bill is better than nothing, and it needs to go forward. It is the first significant piece of legislation attempting to address climate change that the U.S. is passing.
I guess what is not said is within the context of an intractable oil oligarchy.
Right. So then who is behind these ads that are saying demand justice or kill the bill, right? Well, the the small print on the ads is saying that they are paid for by a group called United for Clean Power. So I wanted to do a little look that is all about United for Clean Power and these ads. So far, they've spent upwards of $20,000 on the Google and Meta ads, Meta being Facebook and Instagram, right? Um, I haven't seen them all over WhatsApp, but certainly all over the YouTube, Google, Metaverse. Um, those ads have popped up over the last week like mad. They've also, this group, United for Clean Power, has sponsored Politico's weekly digital newsletter, The New York Playbook, for the last several weeks, and has inserted its message of, no time better than now. It's our last chance. Kill this bill. Yeah, it didn't make any sense, right? So, from the FWIW newsletter, they say that they were able to locate the organization's 2018 and 2019 IRS 990 forms, and those reveal that the organization's only major expenditure was to pay Republican firm Majority Strategies $135,000 for advertising. According to the FEC data, Majority Strategies has worked to elect countless Republican climate deniers to Congress and other elected offices, including recently working for Sarah Palin's campaign for Congress in Alaska this year. The firm last week published research urging their clients to invest in digital ads instead of exclusively focusing on traditional television ads. So that looks like they've absolutely taken up that advice. Just a little cautionary tale to dig deep when we're looking at political messaging, to really kind of get behind who's saying what about whom and who's putting the money following the money. Who is it likely to benefit and all of that? Which brings me to what I have to say is probably one of my biggest hot buttons politically right now, and that is the idea that the Democratic establishment is actually using money. Oh, my cat. Oh, my cat. Is actually using money to promote the worst of the rabid right in the primaries because they feel like they are easier to defeat in the regular election. And that is a strategy, I got to say, that sketches me the fuck out.
Gee, I wonder why. Could it be because the Israeli
Blowback?
military tried the same thing with Hamas? When Hamas was nothing and gave them money that they would embarrass the Palestinians?
There's so much. I mean, there's so much from his story that we can look at. I'm trying to rescue our camera from our cat. So I'm a little distracted. Whoopsie doodles. There's so much from history we can look at. And also just the idea of actually promoting the poisonous messages that these far-right fascist politicians are spewing from their mouths because the Democratic establishment, the Democrat establishment believe it's politically expedient. That's just nonsensical. It's short-sighted in the extreme. It's actually using money won by fear and scare tactics that the Democratic establishment has been putting out there with billions of texts and emails. This is your chance to stop the fascist takeover. Send $5 now to whichever candidate this has just been sent by. While getting that money together to actually promote the weirdest of the right wing, because that's going to pay off strategically down the line. Help me make sense of this, right? It's fucked. I can't. There's just no. It's
dishonest. It's bad. It's it's your contributions to the Democratic Party. Well, actually, I'm sure mostly corporate contributions being used in a manner that is just offensive as hell and possibly dangerous.
I'm going to go with dangerous. I'm going to go anytime we promote those messages. It's a danger to ourselves and others. Speaking of promoting those messages, Viktor Orban.
Oh boy.
So, here's the fascist darling of Hungary, who in the last week has said some particularly abhorrent things, even for Viktor Orban, right? About race mixing and about, how European countries that are allowing in non-European immigrants are race mixing and not European anymore, and how Europeans must be pure, right? I mean, really Nazi shit that has got him called out all over Europe, that had people resigning from his own staff because whoa, one toe over the line, sweet Jesus, right? But he is still the keynote speaker at CPAC in the States because he is the radical right's new darling internationally. And what does that say? How does that reflect on us? I'm going to put it out there, not well. It does not reflect on us well. And the fact that that there are those in the Democratic establishment that believe that fascists are going to look too
Radical.
non-respectable, too fringy, too radical, to get the vote of the American people, so they can promote them in hopes of winning the big game in the fall. You look at the bigger picture and you say, that's a dumb strategy. Stop that. Because I don't think that a lot of folk to the right are actually engaged in critically thinking. They're not going past the sound bites where all they get to hear is culture wars, woke culture, cancel culture, and LGBTQ ideologies. And they're going to be like, all right, I'll vote for whoever you tell me. I'm okay eating my own children, whatever. It's just like they get into this phase, and really there is no critical thought there. And so they just want that daddy, right? And this is the setup for fascism every damn time. So they want Big Daddy to make it safe and to get back to this traditional way that never was, but it feels secure. It's like this bedtime story that you tell yourself for security's sake, and you move on down the road from there. So that's I'm a little taken aback this week with the shenanigans, the cynicism. I guess it's just outright cynicism that the establishment is approaching politics, further polarizing us as a nation when we are on the brink of civil war. It just doesn't seem like a good idea. And I got a little worked up about it there. Thanks for hanging with us.
Well, I guess it's time to be alarmed because, the
I'm
midterms
alarmed.
are coming. Here's hoping that the Roe v. Wade dissolution will mobilize people, but and it is, and the charts are moving towards a different direction. But the predictions have been before Kansas voted very strongly to preserve abortion. The charts were moving so that the Republicans, in all of their, disgusting fascism, were set to take the midterm elections, which means horrible things emanating through the House of Representatives. And that context, it should be alarming because, after all, the spear point of fascism in the United States is that occupying army of militarized police. We don't have scientific studies. We just have our own experience, and we know damn well that they're a bunch of fascists. And, someone could say, but there's this exception and that. There are a few exceptions. There probably were some in the Gestapo. So I want to go to the topic of the military exercises around Taiwan.
Go right on.
Trigger for it, which was Nancy Pelosi, and to be honest about it, China's attitude China's attitude. I'll just leave it at that. Since I'm not Chinese, I'm not going to try to do a good analysis of why Chinese society is getting the way it's getting about Taiwan. But the question is, why? Gosh, why did Nancy go to Taiwan when seemingly even the Pentagon was warning against it? Well, there's so much to be said about that. It's one of those things where I almost don't know where to start, but I will start by saying, why wouldn't Nancy do it? Because, the Republicans hate Nancy Pelosi. Really, 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 really. And they were looking to kill her when they were roaming around the Capitol grounds, the Senate and House chambers. And they hate her for the wrong reasons, but they do remember some of the right reasons. And one of the reasons that they hate her is because she is so corrupt. And let's face it, she and her husband regularly to use their insider knowledge to sell stocks, which is illegal in the United States. They're so powerful they're not called on it. And this is true to the point that when I looked up stocks, and you can do this yourself, look up stocks and Nancy Pelosi, and the first thing that'll come up will be you improve your investment portfolio by following the stocks that Nancy and her husband invest in. Why? Because they're insider traders. And that is just grossly corrupt. They are investing millions of dollars, and they are setting U.S. policy on what's profitable for them. And it certainly includes the recent Chip Investment Act, or whatever they called it. So, of course, she went to Taiwan because right now, the best, most powerful, the smallest nanocircuit, in other words, the best chips, are made in Taiwan, and they are used by the U.S. and Chinese militaries. So I want to talk about, more broadly, imperial oligarchy. The things we get used to are just amazing. For example, there was a recent assassination of a man who is associated, if you're wondering what this shadow is dancing, this is the cat cleaning itself in front of the light bulb. This Obama bin Laden associate has been assassinated. Well, they say that he did this and he did that, and the U.S. has the capacity to approach the country where a criminal is at and ask for extradition. This is how we are supposed to conduct ourselves in international affairs. It is the standard of international affairs, and the United States just blows it off because there are many people in the United States who believe that the United States will rule the world forever from now on. A ridiculous idea. And they just don't have to bother with comity or polity anymore. And so we're going to do these things, and we're going to do assassinations rather than trials. And so we assassinated Obama bin Laden's kid. And what was he guilty of? Absolutely nothing. He never did a thing. He was having a Coke. He was 16. And we blew him up with a missile, and this is supposed to be glorious. This is done under the Obama administration. The things that we get used to are just pretty astonishing. That and the fact that Pelosi and her husband are just going to be grotesquely corrupt, and it's going to affect U.S. policy to the point that Pelosi goes to Taiwan and provokes the Chinese, who are furious about it. Because, after all, the U.S. has said we will honor this one China policy, and we obviously don't. We treat Taiwan as a separate country. We sell them military arms, and we discourage any talk of a peaceful unification with China. I won't use the Chinese term reunification because they weren't unified. I don't care what they say. It's a ridiculous idea. But, it just goes to show that Chinese governments can be ridiculous too. Nancy goes to Taiwan. She says, this is one of the freest societies in the world. That's ridiculous. Finland is one of the freest societies in the world. In Taiwan, if you cross the government, the cops pick you up, and their thing is just to hold you and not do habeas corpus at all. And nobody knows where you are, except everyone knows the cops got you. And they may charge you in a few years, they may not, and you can rot in prison in the meantime. And the whole idea is terror. So that's not free society. Arguably, that doesn't happen to as many people as it does in China. And it doesn't. It's not comparable to driving while black. in the United States, but that ain't no free society. Um, so Benzinga wrote, Pelosi met the Taiwan president Tsai Ing-wen as well as Mark Liu, chairman of Taiwan Semiconductor. And why is this? Well, this is because Nancy and her husband have invested something like $5 million in stock in NVIDIA. NVIDIA is Taiwanese military and industrial chips. And those chips, the chip making facilities are what all this saber rattling is about. And the saber rattling is very extreme at this moment. As I was saying, there was talk in the press that, the military was concerned, Biden was concerned that Nancy might visit Taiwan. It was obviously well scheduled in advance. You can tell that just from the logistics of the thing. The logistics include gigantic U.S. military exercises in and around Taiwan. Well, guess who else is now doing military exercises, naval exercises in and around Taiwan? If you look at the map of where the Chinese are at, it overlaps where the U.S. is at. And so what we have is a massive milling about of warships around the waters of Taiwan. And this was planned in advance. And it's pretty clear from the way the U.S. treated Russia over Ukraine that they're using the same playbook to attempt to provoke China. The idea is if China can be drawn into a lengthy war attempting to take Taiwan, then, well, all the wonderful things, so far as Pelosi's class is concerned, will start happening, which means even more billions and trillions to be spent on U.S. War material, which we will call defense material here without exception in our corporate-owned press, which we will not question, which the corporate-owned press is cooperative with to the extent that you can guarantee that when the first missiles are shot from the major U.S. warships, that will be sent to you by video from a CNN reporter who was sent along with the ship on the sure knowledge that action was going to happen. And this is how we do things in the United States. That's how corrupt we are. That's I've got another 10 pages here I could go on about this, but that's kind of what I wanted to bring up. It's like, this is how far gone we are. This is how corrupt the society is. We are so used to this imperial oligarchy. We are so used to being occupied by these hostile and brutal and murdering police. We just let it go on, and then we talk about democracy being under threat from the Republicans. Well, it is. It's a tiny amount of democracy under the context of what we really have, which is an imperial corporate oligarchy that has made us into the worst situation of maldistribution of wealth that we've ever experienced. The 30s were better. The 20s were better.
It just occurs to me that we just really the wheels have come off, and this week Theresa and I are both just careening. Because if you really look at the stories and how they stack on top of each other, the analysis is bad, right? It just adds up to a level of cynicism amongst the establishment and ruling elite that we know is there, but it's just hard to look at it. It's hard to look it in the face, but we must, right? We must confront it. I know that during the Trump era, it was sometimes comforting or at least amusing to watch Nancy be sassy and sort of push back.
I love that.
And at the same time, this woman, as you're saying, is corrupt to the core when it comes to her own investments and feathering her own nest. And certainly, again, when it comes to the Democratic establishment, this woman pushed Henry Cuellar hard in Texas, a conservative establishment Democrat who won by less than 500 votes against a progressive who would have actually, stood for something. Instead, Nance backed Henry Cuellar, who is pro-forced birth, anti-choice, who is anti-labor, who is really terrible, right? And why does she back him? Well, he had a better chance of winning in the primary, and you got to get a seat here, and you got to blah blah. So why not, pick somebody who has just a terrible ideology that is not going to actually advance what you say your party stands for, but you can get some warm body in that seat, I suppose. Anyways,
Well, and one of the ways to frame
So-
it is to look at. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so when you start stacking it all up, there's this level of cynicism. There's the establishment with the fact that the Pentagon is always the way we try to pull ourselves out of economic hard times, and you gotta blow up bombs to justify making more bombs. There's a whole initiative to renew our arsenal, and what madness is that? We already have way more arms than we could use. We would be, how do we say, uh, uh, half of 1% of the arsenal could end the world, right? And so, what are we doing? What are we doing?
There's the nuclear war.
So
Oh,
there,
yeah, the nuclear war.
right. And so the nuclear saber rattling, which I think is where Theresa started with the, what is Nance doing in Taiwan, and look at this nuclear saber rattling that is now coming out. That's been going on hard through the spring with Russia invading Ukraine. There's been a lot of nuclear saber rattling, and a lot of folks younger, I'm going to say, than us. A lot of folks who didn't live through the first Cold War, who are, uh, I'm looking at some podcasts, I'm watching some streams, I'm taking in some op-ed piece, some blogs about how to win nuclear conflicts, right? And I'm like, no, 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 go all watch war games again. Strange game. The only way to win is not to play. It's unthinkable that we are at this brink.
And it's the state of propaganda that is so astonishing to me. I mean, for example, the talk about, oh, are we going to be in a recession? Oh no, a recession. They're talking about things that affect first very rich people with stocks, and that comes down to about 3 major companies at this point. And for the rest of us, it's like we're in such state of poverty and precarity that half the population, easily half, I would say far more than half, would be utterly destroyed and homeless simply by not having work for 3 months. That would be enough. You'd be lucky to even be able to have a tent on the sidewalk left.
Yeah.
This is the world that we're living in. They're talking about a recession. What the hell difference does it make if there's a recession at this point when you have to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make rent, just to keep up?
But sorry.
Yeah.
But don't worry, they're passing things like the Worker Choice Act. What was that crap? Anyway, we'll have more on that next week.
The freedom to work.
The
for
freedom
sub-minimum
to
wage
work.
for Uber Act. Yeah.
The freedom to work with your choice in screwing yourself over. Gig Economy Act. It's terrible. It's terrible. And again, it is in direct reaction to workers gaining organizing efforts, to workers gaining power at various workplaces, at various shops throughout the country, and a groundswell of unionizing over the last year.
Yeah, which, I mean, statistically, this groundswell is just a tiny, it's like those movies where you're at the bottom of the sea and the depth meter on your submarine just ticks up just a tiny little bit. It's like, oh, we might come loose from the bottom of the seas.
But hey, it's a groundswell.
Terrifies the capitalist.
But still, I mean, again, it's not nothing that 200 Starbucks have been unionized over the last 6 months. That's not nothing. That's a groundswell.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true that workers are in a bad place, but that, to start with, yeah, absolutely. But you're not going to, it is. It is actually a groundswell. We'll continue this discussion later off the air. Like any good couple that's been married for 27 years today. Yay. Will do over pancakes, I'm sure. But what I was going to say about nuclear war.
Let's talk.
So tomorrow, of course, is the anniversary of Hiroshima. anniversary of Nagasaki in a few more days. The US is the only country to actually use nukes in a war, and those two cities being ground zero for our experiment in what these horrific weapons can do. And those weapons that were dropped in Hiroshima and Fukushima, I'm sorry, and Nagasaki, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, uh, are so small comparatively to what we have in the arsenal today, and what Russia has in the arsenal today, and what the other nuclear powers have in the arsenal today. So when we start looking at nuclear saber rattling, suffice it to say you cannot win nuclear war. And it is really far past time to re engage our sense of needing to pull back from the brink of this nuclear holocaust. Um, so there is a group called Back from the Brink. It's a um, group made up of, it's endorsed by dozens, scores of groups, um, and municipalities across the country. Back from the Brink, they are putting out a 5-point solution to get involved with. And it seems like a good attempt to reinvigorate generalized anti nuke, anti war stance. So, according to Back from the Brink, they say they call on the United States to lead a global effort to prevent nuclear war. And their 5 policy points that they want people to engage on are pursuing global elimination. They say, given the extraordinary destructive power of nuclear weapons, it should be the highest U.S. national priority to seek the elimination of those weapons, those proposed by other countries and those in our own arsenal. The U.S. is really good, right? And the nuclear nonproliferation stuff is really good at saying no more. You know, you rogue states, you other countries can't have them because you might use them irresponsibly. But you know, the U.S. and France and NATO powers can have them because somebody needs to be the cops of the world, and we need the biggest weapons.
Well, because after all, they're not white. I mean,
Oh,
industrialized.
ah, sorry about this, but spring is happening. Um, God, we're just so seam showing. Every now and again, I think, what would it be like if we had a studio in editing? Anyway, the other things that Back from the Brink, the other 4 points of their 5-point strategy: renouncing all first use, ending sole authority for use, ending the hair trigger alert status, and canceling plans to remake our arsenal, canceling the enhanced weapons plans. And those seem like really basic points to start with, right?
All perfectly reasonable.
Just wanted to bring in that. There is no, and there is no time to wait. Like with climate change, we have we're way past time, and every day that goes on, we put ourselves in a more precarious situation. And so, and the same as it comes to the rise of fascism and the polarization of our society. When the Democratic establishment says, "Yeah, let's go for polarization because it's going to be good for the polls," that's wrong, and we have to decry it loudly. When we are doing the nuclear saber rattling and provocation to other countries to rattle their sabers, it's wrong, and we have to decry it loudly. We have to also really center our discussion on what I see as 3 major uh, legs supporting the table of terror. The terror table, I'll call it. I'll work with this analogy over the next few days. Anyway, that what I'm seeing is um, fascism, climate catastrophe, and nuclear holocaust. And these three really existential crises. Any one of these is huge enough to, send me to, my bedroom for a week, just wanting to, sort of sob and eat chocolate. Um, we can't do that. We can't step back right now. We are in a global crisis, and we have to respond in that, to that in a real way.
I have to agree.
All right. Well, there we are. Do you have anything else?
That concludes my remarks. Tarot time.
All right. Well, here's what I have for tarot. Um, yes, it's the cats. The cats again. You may recall from last week when we had the Five of Swords, or the Five of Fangs in this deck. We have for this week the Five of Swords, the Chariot, and the Seven of Swords. So it's a pokey week. Guess we could have seen that coming. The Five of Swords, again, is a card that reminds us that the cessation of immediate conflict does not mean resolution. That ending a conflict does not necessarily bring peace. That without digging a little deeper about what's going on, you can't really bring conflict to an end. So there is some value in being able to find some inner peace, being able to walk away from things that are destructive, but knowing that it's likely to come back and likely to have another go round if you don't get to some root causes to resolve. The Chariot really talks about maintaining balance and moving forward, taking action as appropriate, but constantly being in action, being in the flow, but holding on to balance as much as you can. It keeps the chariot from tipping over. Right? Traditionally, this card is sort of seen with these, with like a white horse and black horse, these sort of dualistic sort of images, and the charioteer holding the reins, so that they are in the powers are harnessed in harmony, in that they are balanced, and that provides the momentum so that you can take great actions and keep things going without upsetting the apple cart. You're holding to the balance. And with that, the Seven of Swords. Seven of Swords is an interesting card, and it talks about duplicity. Sometimes it can be seen as a card talking about duplicity. Anyway, be looking out for schemes, looking out for things that aren't what they seem to be, and for people who are trying to hoodwink you, kind of like those ads put out by shadowy groups with names that don't have anything to do with who they are. That certainly at the one level kind of underscores that, that sort of mentality of boosting your opponent so that you can defeat them easier. That kind of subterfuge. It also points to the ability to use our own wits and our own analysis, if we can get clear enough to engage in that battle of wits and analysis, and lead off the physical realm, right? To not have to get into a street fight, as it were, but to be smart about our opposition and resistance, and to make sure that we are applying our full analysis and brain power to it, and that we are able to see through subterfuge that might be being thrown at us. And so that's what I have for this week's tarot. And with that, We hope you have a good week. The moon is waxing at this time. It's first quarter today, and we are going into the full moon next Thursday. And with that, it's time to think about increasing what we need for balance, for peace, and for the coming fall, for the darker times ahead, reaching out to each other with love, always.
And if this goes out to any of the warships there in the Taiwan Strait, this historically this is going to be known as the fourth Taiwan Strait crisis. That's how absurd it is. That's how historic it is. It's dangerous as hell. So I was about to say, and all the ships at sea, and then I thought of those. And gee, I wish that some people on ships at sea would watch this video and consider these things well. Don't press that button.
All right. Take care, friends, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.